For the first time, Floyd's torso was now available. Then his hips, his upper thigh.
His hip, boy! Listen, they get that off my chest, I'm doing mad deep breath.
Hold up, wait a minute. Y'all thought I was finished?
They started this one like the beginning of a video game. Hold up. You gotta slide the sliders.
In the state of Kentucky, there is a cave.
Okay.
That every now and then demands
Sand cave?
a sacrifice. January 30th, 1925. A man walks towards the cave with a kerosene lamp in his hand. He hangs up his jacket and ducks into a 5-foot opening.
Okay.
The inside of the cave is narrow. He has to drop down on his hands and knees, crawling through a passageway filled with jagged rocks and choking dust. Then down a chute he had cleared out months earlier. All of the daylight is gone from here, and this lantern is his only source of light.
That joint better
Ignoring
be
the
full.
loose limestone
boy.
rocks perched directly above him, he is now 100 feet in.
Escape helicopter.
And here he reaches the turnaround room. Now they call this the turnaround room because this is the juncture where even experienced cavers say, no thanks, and turn around. Because to continue on means going through this.
The squeeze.
The squeeze. A gap in the stone of only 9 inches. For reference, here's a...
Now listen, if I lay down flat on my stomach, all right? I'm not even gonna say it. I'm not even gonna say it.
Subway sub. Going through, he would look exactly like this.
Yeah, there's no way. You look at him. Look. Does this look like me? No, I'm not going, all right?
His arms will need to be completely at their side, and he will need to exhale so that he can reduce the size of his torso. Gradually, bit by bit, he disappears into the hole. His clothes are caught on sharp
You submit
gypsum
your application?
crystals,
Yes, sir.
hooking into him and threatening to hold him in place. But using his feet like paddles, he pushes through. He reaches a wider opening at the other side, then crawls forward towards a ledge.
Is that J. Cole?
Illuminated here is a 10-foot drop. A rope is already secured around a boulder, which allows him to rappel down. His worn-out leather shoes touch the ground.
Son.
This is as far as he can
King
go.
was good.
And it is time for work to begin. What he is working on is another opening. At the moment, it's too small for anyone to fit through, but he will chip away at it until he can shove himself right through the other side. Because on the other side is this. A magnificent and otherworldly cave structure that will be irresistible to tourists. Every day for months, he has been removing rocks from this crevice. To him, this is all just routine. So he eases further into the gap. Carefully, he contorts his body through. Rocks compress the sides of his torso so close that his arms are pinned to the side of his body. He once again paddles his feet to inch down. Then, about halfway, he stops. The lantern. It's starting to dim. He will need to go all the way back to the surface to refuel the thing. He sighs. He slowly shuffles back out, pushing the lantern with his shoulder. Then, oh no. Ding, crack.
Chat, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Y'all see that? Hold on. Let me make this big for y'all. Come on now. Come on now. I'm a caveman, all right? Stop playing with me.
He has knocked over
Riley
the lamp,
was good.
and it has broken.
I got you. We on TikToks tonight.
Now, the man didn't panic. He had been caught in the dark before, and he could make his way back by feel alone. So he continues worming out, leveraging his foot against what he thinks is the cave wall. But that is not the cave wall. That is, in fact, a rock protruding from the ceiling.
Fun time.
As soon as he puts his weight against the rock, it breaks loose.
Ankle broke.
A solid piece weighing 15 kilograms lands directly on his ankle. It aches. But he's okay. It doesn't feel as though his ankle is broken, just badly bruised and caught underneath the rock. So he shuffles to move the rock away. Suddenly, gravel. A lot of gravel. It falls onto his feet, his legs, his torso, and the weight of it all forces the wedged rock deeper into the gap underneath his foot. Pinned. He tries to push forward. He cannot. He tries.
His lamp is broken, and my man's whole body is getting encased with gravel. I would die panicking, bro. I wouldn't even die by getting crushed. My anxiety would kill me on the spot.
To inch backwards. He cannot. He is stuck. This is Sand Cave. This man is Floyd Collins. He is trapped in absolute darkness. 60 feet deep below the earth.
Cold, all right?
All of his limbs held in place. At the very
link to your
bottom
Discord,
of this.
Panda, can you put the link to the Discord in the chat? There you go. Thank you, thank you. He's deep in there too.
But before I tell you what happens next, ad time. Speaking of people trapped in a cave, well...
Hey, listen. Internet historian, I love you, my guy. You know what I'm saying? Link in his description. You know what I'm saying? Type beat.
Collins is still in the dark, unable to move. His left arm was pinned underneath his torso, his right wedged by the rock ceiling above. Beneath him, sharp crystal shards dug into his skin. Ice thawed, traced across the ceiling, and dripped down directly onto his face, pooling underneath him. The water was a consistent 54 degrees.
What is that?
Floyd tried
Chinese
to breathe
waterboarding?
calmly in the concentrated dark. When he did attempt to shuffle, more gravel and rocks would tumble from above and pile onto his feet, so nothing would work. He clawed at the cave walls till his fingertips were bloody, and he realized that there was only one option left. Call out for help. But wait. Who is Floyd, and why did he even go into a dangerous cave?
Questions we need
Floyd has
answered.
been exploring the caves of Kentucky since he was merely 6 years old. And as he grew up, he gained a reputation for being a very daring caver. He would dive into some hole on one side of town and emerge miles away on someone else's property.
Sup?
He grew up and he became embroiled in the Kentucky Cave Wars. Now, there's way too much to go into here, but the summary version is there's this huge network of interconnected caves called Mammoth Caves. Okay. It's actually the largest cave system.
Hey, that's where the picture I showed you, bro. I was in Tennessee, though. All right? That's where I was. Come on,
in the world. And there's a city right in the middle of it.
Yes, sir.
Cave City, real name. So, of course, there are dozens of cave entrances on private property all over the place. Now, farmland in this region has very poor soil, and things do not grow well here. So, cave tourism as a source of income quickly became the prominent thing. However, a problem. There are a very large number of caves, but there are only a limited number of tourists. So competition rapidly escalated. Visit my cave. No. Visit my cave. Big signs were erected saying, tourists, come to me. Mine is definitely open. Mine is the best. But then competitors would respond by saying, hey, by the way, we're open, but don't go to that one over there. It's really shitty. In fact, it's dangerous.
That's crazy.
This kept going further. By the end, they were blocking off the trail to each other's property, beating each other in the streets, and hiring people called cappers who would dress up as policemen and tell tourists, no, you can't go with.
So little baby stole the word cap.
No, that one. No, it's
That's
illegal.
Crazy.
Despite the fierce competition, Floyd found
Bruh, cappers date back to 1929? Come on, man.
a cave on his property and he started advertising it to tourists. Of course, very few came. All right, he thought, what if I found something really special and unique? Then surely people would have to come to my cave to see it. So he kept exploring and exploring until he found this hollow. It was filled with big gypsum crystals, and when you were in there, it felt like a completely alien world. But it was barely accessible. This small tunnel is the only way in. He would need to dig for months to open it up to tourists, but he knew he could do it. Back to the competition. They knew the value of this cave. They knew the potential, they wanted it for themselves, and they wanted Collins gone. One time, 5 of them just wandered onto Floyd's property and demanded he hand over the lease. When he refused, they just started beating the shit out of him. This only stopped when Floyd's brother, Homer, marched out with a shotgun and chased them all off. But Floyd was not
Right to unload these Glocks, all right? It's the Second Amendment. Something like that. That's what it says.
deterred. He spent 12 hours a day, every day, for months, clearing gravel and stone, chipping away at that passage. He would open it up to tourists, make his cave an incredible attraction, and make his dreams come true.
We calling for help, Jesus. Facts.
So there's Floyd in the dark, yelling out for help. He's at the start of a very tiring loop. Sleep, wake, yell. Sleep, wake, yell. Hours passed. His voice gave in. Arms tingled numb. Pain radiating up his ankle.
Crazy.
Here he remained in the dark for the next 23 hours.
Yes, sir.
Quickly you might wonder, how come no one's come for him after
Facts.
23 hours?
I know he peed on himself, boy.
Well, Sand Cave resides on a 200-acre farm. There are several homes on this property with other families. One of them, of course, is Collins' house, where Floyd's father, Lee, resides. Now, Lee and Floyd constantly get into fights about how to run things. Lee wants his son to concentrate on farming, and Floyd wants to concentrate on cave tourism.
He had to
Arguments
plan
would
for the
often get
future.
heated. And Lee was also a bit of a drunk. It was doubtful that he would even notice if his son Floyd was missing.
Crazy.
Also not helping things, Floyd regularly lodged at 2 other homes on the farm. So when he didn't return to one host,
His dad didn't
they
think to
would
look for
presume
him.
that he was staying with
Crazy.
the other. And, even worse than that, he had recently spent 30 hours in a cave. So disappearing for this length of time wasn't seen as abnormal. Regardless, around the 23-hour mark, a few locals started to suspect that, hey, something might be wrong, and they went to check up on him. And here, they spotted his jacket still hung up. Unusual. They went deeper. However, there was only one person small enough to make it as far as the turnaround room. This was a 17-year-old Jewel Estes.
Hey,
He
hard to
refused
steal,
to go
boy.
into the squeeze, but it was close enough to call Collins' name.
Floyd!
And Collins yelled back.
Bro, from the Candyman 3
Estes
times,
emerges
fast
from the
boy.
cave.
Okay,
You gotta do what
we
you
know
gotta
he's
do at that
trapped,
point.
and we know where he is.
So, locals
Watch
started to gather
Internet
outside.
Historian.
Out of my way, say a bunch of men who would each show up and take turns heading into the cave in an attempt to reach Collins. But once they reached the turnaround room,
Nope.
Facts. Nope.
Nope.
they would fail to reach him, emerging from the cave, soaked in mud and cursing. Out of my way, they would say as they were heading in the reverse direction. So a few more hours passed. Word would spread around town. Dozens of locals from Cave City started to gather outside. Over in Louisville, Floyd's 22-year-old brother, Homer, he gets a phone call.
Hello? I see. My brother. He's trapped in a cave? I'm on my way.
Homer jumps on a coach and makes his way to Floyd's cave. Homer struts up to the scene.
38 hours stuck
Dozens
on the
of
rocks,
men are
bro.
standing around outside. He ignores them all and marches right into the cavern, still wearing his city clothes. He makes his way in, down the chute, through the narrowing passages, down on his hands and knees towards the turnaround room. And when he arrives,
Nope.
he does not hesitate. He squeezes into the hole, scrambles his way through to the ledge on the other side. He sees Floyd below and slides down
Dreaded
to meet him.
Tripping, boy.
Floyd!
What's up?
Right, probably wasn't that casual.
Oh, thank God you're here.
Homer took a moment to shine his light around the area and assess the situation. It was not good. This rock formation is going to prove almost impossible to work around.
Oh, that's crazy.
Alright, so let's have a look. Floyd is here. The rock is here, pinning his ankle. He's surrounded by rubble, and there's a pocket of gravel above him ready to fall. However, because this opening is so small, there are only two viable ways of reaching Floyd and that gravel. Option 1, the most obvious, feet first. But if you do this, you have to kind of squat, and your own torso obstructs access to the rubble. Otherwise, option 2, come down head first. That will give you better access, but you're trying to move hundreds of pounds of gravel upside down.
Yeah.
Worse yet, there's
Blood
barely
gonna
an
rush to
inch
your head, you
around
gonna pass
Collins
out.
on either side. So good luck getting your arm down near Floyd's ankle to actually free him from the wedged rock. Homer calls back to the less daring rescuers standing behind him.
Quickly, some food and drink.
They send it through. He hand feeds his brother a pint of coffee and a total of 9 sausage sandwiches.
Feeling better?
Much better.
Then
My man handed him a whole pack of glizzies. Your first meal, you've been stuck in a cave for a day and a half, is mad glicks. I'm gonna scarf him down, okay?
Homer went to task.
I don't even know how he's gonna swallow. My man ain't got like no, you know what I'm saying?
He began removing rocks and gravel, tiny scoop at a time, with the help of an old syrup can.
Two days.
For the next 8 hours he toiled, first with hands, then, once enough was cleared, using a crowbar to scoop behind his brother, scraping away sharp protrusions as he went. It was slow progress. Virtually futile. As soon as he removed one rock or scoop of gravel, another would tumble from above and land in the new absence. And it was exhausting work.
I can
By
imagine.
sunrise, Homer's arms and back were knackered. His lungs burned. He was losing hope. Homer emerged hours later, shivering violently, skin bruised from his fingertips, but the cave barely yielded at all. However, something new.
Gotta bring
By
some
the
water
time
down
Homer
here, too.
reached outside, he was greeted by a sea of approximately 100 men and women standing around, drinking, squabbling, and talking big game about how they too were going to save Floyd.
No, you not.
The press was also present to help people gawk from afar. Now, Homer recuperated at a small tent near the cave's mouth.
That's crazy.
Strangers immediately crowded around him to ask innocent but, frankly, frustrating questions and offer unsolicited, obvious advice as well as wildly impractical solutions. He should try untying his shoes, said one. No, we should send him down with a contortionist who's got a...
If y'all don't shut up from the outside of this cave, all right? All these suggestions, y'all ain't been down there once. Get out of my face.
mallet and a chisel. We should jerk him off, right, guys?
See, that right there, that is a man with a plan, all right? Get him out of here, all right? Get him out of here.
All right, I made that third guy up. But you get the idea. And they started to argue with each other about their plans. Hey, how about using dynamite? One clique formed, insisting that it was a great idea. And another saying, no, the explosion will kill him, and the weight of the new rocks will surely crush him. They fought for a while until they started arguing about gas torches, which will cook him or asphyxiate him, or the gas will poison him. But by far the most common suggestion, of course, was amputation. Never mind that the foot itself was unreachable, and never mind what the blood loss and shock would do to Floyd's weakened body, and never minding even more that Floyd was strongly reluctant to the idea.
Whatever you do, don't cut my foot off.
All of the squabble would not have gotten on Homer's nerves, except that not one of them would just brave the damn cave and continue shoveling away the gravel. The formula was always the same.
See, they was all
Brave
just
heroes
chatting.
go in with food and supplies. then reach the turnaround room and immediately lose their nerve, then dump the food just outside the hole,
That's
and then
crazy.
return back outside and go, oh, absolutely. No, he says, thanks for the food. Thank you so much. Yum, yum. No one would go through that squeeze. Dozens more men would try.
I wouldn't.
All of them would fail.
His brother, though, real trooper. Dang, we had 3
February
days
2nd,
now.
9 a.m. So far, Homer has been the only person to have reached Floyd. And that would continue
Is that
to be
DJ
true
Academics for real?
until here we are at the Louisville Courier. There's a spirited young newshawk named
I'm trying to figure out who these faces are, bro.
William Miller. He's talking to his boss, and he's trying to convince him that it's a great idea for him to cover the story of the man trapped in the cave.
Listen up, boss. I'm hearing talk of a man in a cave. He's stuck down there, and I want to get down there too. Get to the nitty-gritty, you hear?
This is an opportunity for some good PR, Miller. I'm in. But I want us to sponsor that rescue. Picture this. Man saved from cave by Louisville Courier, the finest newspaper in the state. That'll drum up plenty of business.
24-carat
only
idea,
think
boss.
about money,
I'll make
Brian.
it happen. I'll get down there toot sweet.
So
It's
off
making me
Miller goes
reconsider my
to
application.
Floyd's
Nah.
cave.
Hey, once you in, my brother.
Back over at the cave, Homer is sitting
For $2 million, I'll climb down there. Come on now, what we doing, all right? We eating good when I come back with that $2 million, all right?
outside trying to recuperate. As Miller wanders up, he glares at the man in his city clothes and answers every question with either a grunt or a one-word answer.
Yeah. Sure.
Finally, he gestures to Sand Cave.
Listen, you want more information? The hole's right behind me. Why don't you go take a look yourself?
Now, Miller is
Whoa,
only
what you mean by
21,
that?
But he is a slender and
Conrad, what's
determined
good, my
man.
boy?
He takes on the challenge. So he removes his suit, drapes himself in coveralls, and grabs a lamp. Miller slowly enters the cave. He finds himself stepping in puddles and having to correct his balance against the ever-softening walls. These were accumulating problems thanks to the gawkers outside who had lit campfires all around the entrance.
What'd that do?
That caused snowmelt, and the stable environment of the cave is starting to shift. But Miller makes it further than most. And all that's left is that final squeeze, and he's there. He stops. He takes a moment and decides to call out to Floyd.
Floyd!
Hearing there is someone on the other side, he feels ashamed not to try. So he closes his eyes and moves forward. His slender figure begins inching through. The crystal gypsum cuts into his elbows and tugs at his clothes. He gets snagged. He's spluttering
Go
through
ahead,
the
pull
pools
through.
of muddy water. He stops, collects himself, and
He left
pushes
his
on.
lantern back
He
here?
can barely inhale. If he gets stuck in here, he can only hope that someone else can come in from behind and pull him out by the legs. But eventually, he makes it through. Fantastic. He's now standing on the edge of a 10-foot pit, and he clumsily bumbles his way down. He sat right next to Floyd, ready to interview him.
I'm not answering no questions, bruh. You go back up there, you get somebody who got one of them good old Second Amendments, all right? Send them down here and tell them I would like to go back to the lobby. Write that down, take it up there. That's what I would have said. Don't play with me.
But Floyd didn't really answer any of his questions. In fact, he was incoherent. At the moment, he is sitting in a pool of water that is 12 degrees, slowly sapping his body temperature. He is dying from exposure. The cold is diminishing Floyd's mental faculties, and he can barely make sentences. So Miller took a few mental notes, and he left.
Clout
He
is a
worked
hell
his
of a
way
drug.
back
Facts,
through
man.
the squeeze, past the turnaround
Hey, I'm
room,
gonna make it back if
and
I go,
out
all
into
right?
the daylight.
I need
He is
that $2
covered
million.
in mud and scratches and numb head to toe. And when Homer saw, his hope reignited. Someone else had made it to Floyd.
You and me. Together, we can get Floyd out of there.
If Miller hadn't gone to that cave, there's a good chance that Floyd's story would have remained an obscure footnote in the back pages.
Okay.
But the interviews and first-person accounts gave the audience a glimpse of something real. Fear, hope, desperation, the full range. And so from Los Angeles to New York, Floyd's story was picked up everywhere and described the Kentucky man's plight in sensational detail. It was also the era when radio became a regular feature for regular Americans. Radio allowed something new: hourly updates, letting people get engrossed into the story.
That's
So,
crazy.
mostly thanks to Miller, the story of Floyd over the next week would grow and grow, seemingly frothing over into every aspect of American life. The press at large would be clamoring
Listen, I need my cut when I get up here, bruh. I need my portion. Okay?
over each other for every little extra scrap of detail they could get about Floyd. And everybody wanted to know, will this man make it? Back outside the cave, someone new enters the scene. Lieutenant Robert Burden, a thin
firefighter.
but strong 33-year-old Louisville firefighter. Like Miller, he was able to navigate the passages of the cave and brave the
3
squeeze.
days, bruh.
Scratched up pretty good and drenched in cold, muddy water, he managed to get through. He grabbed the rope and confidently lowered himself to Floyd's position. It was not an optimistic sight. Floyd's condition was deteriorating.
I can imagine.
We've got a heck of a problem here, but I think I can get you out with a rope.
Floyd nods in approval.
Go on.
We might just pull your bloody leg off.
Just pull my leg off then.
That's what I
Get me
would
out
have
of
said,
here.
bro. I would have said
Burden
that
returned
first
to the
day.
surface and faced the crowd.
Hey, get me
Yeah.
out of here.
We
Leave
will
the
attempt
foot, okay?
a rope pull.
The crowd murmured. It was dangerous.
Dre, appreciate you
It
pulling
would
up, my
certainly
boy.
break his foot and could altogether pull it off. If there are jagged rocks, you'll fill it the poor man. Amongst the crowd, a doctor stepped forward. A rope pull could stretch his internal organs and cause them to rupture. You'll kill him. But Floyd is dying of exposure down there. The situation is becoming desperate. Burden put caution to the side.
The time for strategy is over. Now we try brute force.
Okay. I wouldn't have made it this far. My man, Namor, the Submariner boy.
Floyd! Floyd! We're here. We're gonna get you out of here.
After 79 hours in the cold water, he is delirious, fading in and out of consciousness. Homer gave his brother some coffee and fed him a couple of ham sandwiches. That
Eat
warms
up,
him up
drink
and
up.
gives him a bit more energy, and he comes back to lucidity.
I know it smelled like Dookie
Oh,
down there, bro.
much better.
I'm gonna put
can't
the
pretend like
special
he ain't
harness
doo-dooed on
around
himself
you.
yet.
Burden and Miller, they're here too. We got 3 more boys right up the cave, and they're all ready to pull as hard as they can to get you out of here.
Floyd was frightened.
Yes, sir.
Not gonna lie, it's gonna hurt.
He gave his brother some whiskey and a strong sedative to calm his nerves, and also to help him withstand
Oh,
the
my man done
shock
popped the
in
perk.
case his foot is destroyed. Floyd took the opportunity to appreciate being surrounded by friends and family.
Go on. Do it.
All right, strap him up.
Homer tied the harness around Colin's chest and knotted the rope.
Ready?
Above, Miller is crouched at the top of the pit.
Ready?
Burden clenches the cord from further up the cave.
3,
The rope goes taut.
2,
Do it.
1.
Oh!
Instinctively, Floyd gasps. The force of 6 men pulled
Pulling on
against
his
the
chest.
clutches of the cave. Floyd began to scream. His body was being pulled up from the rubble. The gravel was beginning to shift. Burden clenched his teeth. Floyd screamed harder as well. Now, Floyd was trapped in a supine position, but the direction of the rope caused an upwards force that wrenched him vertically. His torso was being compressed and bent against the ceiling of the trap. It would kill him. Floyd
They
screaming
should have had somebody like moving the dirt out. You know what I'm saying? As they pulled, that would have been probably good too.
intensified, and through gasps was begging them to stop. The screams filled the echoing cave, but it did not stop. The agony
Facts.
continued.
Cue up the Drake, bro.
On and on, with no progress.
Enough! Enough! You guys are killing him!
Homer pulled in the opposite direction to give his brother some reprieve. Somehow, Homer mustered the strength to altogether wrench the cord from the other men's hands. The rope went slack. Homer, Floyd, and the rope lay limp on the cave floor, panting and exhausted. No progress had been made.
That's crazy.
The cave would not let this man go. The futility of the situation sank in, and all they could do was leave for now and reassess. Everybody was shaken by the experience. Burden fainted as he crawled towards the exit. Most of the other men had to be carried away. Outside, the crowd had grown to 200. They buzzed and asked useless questions, and Homer walked dejectedly past them. He sat by thinking what he could do. The cause seemed hopeless.
Homer?
Then, someone showed up who could turn things around.
That's the
He looked
professor
up to
from
see
Money
a
Heist.
childhood friend of both his and Floyd's, Johnny Gerald.
Okay.
Gerald knew more about cave rescues than most. In fact, just that summer prior, he had helped untangle Floyd from a different snag. He was just the man for the job.
All right, let me go see him. Well, look who it is.
Floyd perked up immediately,
Yay.
thrilled to see Gerald.
All right, let's see what we can do.
Bro, if I
Gerald
was
jumped
Floyd,
out.
I would never go
For
in
the
the cave
next
after
3
this
hours,
if I got out.
Gerald went back to the
Ever
original
again.
plan of prying away rocks. His stamina was good, and progress was surprisingly good as well. For several more hours, he continued, just moving stone after stone. New one would fall in its place, and he'd move that one too. By midnight, he had enough room to shift position and clear some of the gravel that was at each side of Floyd's body.
Okay.
Gerald would spend several more hours scooping. And it worked. For the first time, Floyd's torso was now available. Then his hips, his upper thigh.
His hip, boy. Listen, they get that off my chest. I'm doing mad deep breath. Boy, I ain't breathed like this in 3 days.
For the first time in over 90 hours, Floyd was able to wiggle his arms, his hips, and even that trapped right leg, though it was very painful to do. In that one session, Gerald managed to move a half-ton of rock.
That's crazy.
But there was still a lot more to
That
go.
man is doing work.
And that rock by his foot was still holding him in place. By 2 a.m., Gerald was spent. He needed rest, and he was ready to head back outside.
Floyd, tomorrow, you're gonna be a free man.
I hear you, my boy.
Now,
I
here you
hear
might
you.
think that things will become straightforward. They did not. Now that space had been cleared, Burden became convinced that if he could get down that passage again, he could free Floyd with another rope pull, fate deciding with both feet or just one. But when Burden tried to enter the cave again, he was sternly rebuffed by the locals. They
as
were
he should
playing
be.
gatekeeper. They had been specifically instructed to not let anyone in, and they were especially opposed to Burden.
At least ask the person who made all the progress, is this a good idea, before you try to big brain this, okay?
Making another rope pull after word spread about the disaster of the first attempt. He tried to reason with them.
Let me try the rope pull again. It'll work this time.
They wouldn't let up. Instead, they shouted obscenities and shoved him in the other direction.
They about to turn it. That's crazy.
Meanwhile, Gerald and Homer are incapacitated with exhaustion, and Miller was busy filing some paperwork for the Louisville Courier. Nobody else
We're trying to get
had the
that
ability
story.
or the authority to take action, so Floyd spent all of that morning alone.
Hello? Is anyone there? Help? Hey,
He's on his 5th day, bro.
anyone out there?
Fourth day.
Word spread about Floyd. Miller's reporting had been picked up by the AP Newswire, and they distributed it amongst their hundreds of partnered newspapers. For Miller, it would be the biggest moment of his career. But he didn't stop to pay it mind. He spent the day hatching a rescue plan. Miller descended into the cave and set to work. When he entered, he found that the team before him had strung light bulbs all through the cavern,
W's.
leading all the way down to Floyd. Very handy. A bulb was also put around Floyd's neck to keep him warm and make sure that he was never again left in the dark. Miller popped down to Floyd.
Bro, let me tell y'all something, all right? Cave darkness is different than regular darkness, okay? So imagine, I forgot about that, bro. Y'all gotta go to a cave. They cut the lights off in this cave I went to. I promise you, I thought my soul left my body, all right? Like, you can't see nothing. And he was down there in pitch dark. Boy, ain't no way.
Ah, Floyd, fancy seeing you here, buddy.
Reusing that syrup tin, he started offloading gravel into buckets. Those buckets were then passed up and down the cavern. And so it went on for the next 2 hours. Miller stopped for a break. He took some bread, milk, and whiskey, and sharing it with Floyd, they started to get to talking. Floyd had been in that cave for over 100 hours now, and seeing everyone working together, Floyd was overcome with a sense of hope and relief, and so he began spilling his heart out to Miller. Here is what he is quoted in the newspaper.
I believed I would go to heaven. I can feel that I'm to be taken out alive and with both my feet. I kept thinking,
Keep hope
what
alive.
would happen if the rock above me would fall? It caused me to shudder. I kept thinking to drive my mind to something else, but it wasn't much use. I couldn't do much to help those who came to help me, but I knew that a lot of people were willing to do all in their power. It gave me courage. Tuesday morning, I thought to myself, 4 days down here, and no nearer freedom than I was on the first day. How will it end?
You got your chest
Will I
out,
get
you know what I'm
out?
saying?
I couldn't think of it. I have faced death before. It doesn't frighten me, but it is so long. Tell them I am not going to give up.
All right, Superman.
Tell them I'm going to fight and be patient and never forget them.
Be patient. What else you gonna do? Besides sit there.
Meanwhile, Floyd's story kept growing. Pedestrians would gather around corner store windows to read the latest bulletins. The press began using giant typefaces, commonly only reserved for declarations of war.
That's
Churches
crazy.
in all of the nearby counties were holding services for Floyd. Theaters even interrupted their shows to update the audience. Now, at the
They
time,
running up that
President
bag.
Coolidge was in charge, and his Secretary of
Hey, listen, we're gonna pass this collection plate around. These are going for blessings to my man Floyd down in the cave. You know what I'm saying? Pastor was out there eating lobster dinners after that. Okay.
Commerce was a geologist, Herbert Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so Herbert
Who going to be the 31st Come on, bruh. What? The president? One of the presidents?
Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so it was likely that the president did too. Even Congress paused session to ask about the latest news from Sand Cave. By the end, the Floyd Collins incident would explode into the third largest non-political story between World War I and World War II.
Does that count the Great Depression though? All right, because if you competing with the Great Depression as a storyline, as one man stuck in a cave, listen.
All of this excitement brought an inundation of people to Cave City. Old population, 690. Yawn. New population, 10,000. Hotels ran out of food. Residents turned their homes into makeshift hotels, charging sizable premiums to let people nap
Started
in their
Airbnb-ing?
bathtubs. The banks quickly ran out of on-hand cash, and 4,500 automobiles impatiently sat, backed up for 2 miles from 20 different states to drive onto the Collins farm
That's
and
sick.
turn their pristine green pastures into swampy parking lots. Deep below all those tourists, there's Miller, trying to free Floyd. All right, a little bit of setup. Floyd, Miller, some remaining rubble, rock. For anyone to lift the rock by hand would be impossible because Floyd's body obstructs the hole. Miller grabs a crowbar and shoves it through the gap. Now he's going to lever it off Floyd's foot. Cool. The crowbar is now wedged against the rock.
Push it down.
Next, he takes a jack. He positions it on top of the crowbar so that it will be forced against the ceiling. However, problem. That jack is too big. It doesn't fit. Miller yells up the tunnel for a smaller one, but this took some time. And when it arrived, too small, won't reach the ceiling. But instead of sending for another one, Miller takes 2 blocks of wood and bolsters them underneath the crowbar. Right, so the
Innovation
crowbar
right
now
there,
sits
right?
higher, it fulcrums against the blocks, and the jack is sitting on top. All Miller has to do is expand the jack, which he will do using this spanner, holding it at the very tips of his fingers. Sounds easy. It's not.
Not only has my man been stuck down here for almost 5 days, now he got a weenie on his forehead, bruh.
But that's the plan. Let's get him out of there. He turned the wrench, the jack expanded, and the crowbar took strain. The whole thing slid apart with a pang. Floyd wasn't hurt, but Miller was contorting and exerting his whole body from back to fingertip. They tried again. Same result.
Dang.
Miller tried a new angle. Maybe this time. The jack pressed. The tension increased. And this time, the rock moved. It fucking moved. With each turn, the stone shifted a little more. Miller's hands shook with adrenaline, his face and body dripping with sweat. Pang. One of the blocks slipped, and the wooden tower went sideways. The rock painfully slammed back down on Colin's foot.
You'll get it next time, Miller. Try again.
Miller did. Again. And again. Adding blocks, taking them away, new crowbar position, changed the jack position, every angle, all while Floyd was there, cheering him on.
Yay.
That's crazy.
For the next 4 hours he tried. No progress. Miller was exhausted. He couldn't do this on his own, but he was the only one slim enough to get in through the gap. The group decided to concede for now and return to the surface.
It's got to be
They would
another
take just a small break,
way.
but it looked to everyone like there was a clear way to get this man out. So Miller and Burden crawled back through the mud and the wines of the cave. As they made their way through, the cave was visibly sagging. The ceiling seemed lower. Parts were harder to navigate than before, especially now with their bruised and purple hands. But they made it outside to the fresh, early morning air. And here is where they're greeted with a new sight. Dozens of soldiers. The National Guard had arrived. In addition to the National Guard, a new figure was joining the story, Henry Carmichael. Now, Carmichael was the general superintendent of the Kentucky Rock Asphalt Company. He had been on site since Tuesday, and he was appalled at how primitive the rescue attempts had been. Shortly after Miller and co. had exited,
Well, it's nice
Carmichael
for you to
sent
show up.
2 men into Sand Cave to assess the structure's stability. They soon came back with a report. It was not good. Near the final squeeze, large cracks had formed. The ceiling was beginning to droop. Alright, so the following is a recounting of events from one of Carmichael's men, Casey Jones.
Okay.
Casey and another worker spent about an hour in the cave, surveying its condition, looking at the boards, the ceiling, the stability of the walls. He continued deeper towards Floyd. He was fighting against his nerves. The shifting of the rock pinged his every instinct to flee. But he heard Collins moaning ahead, so he pushed himself on. He managed to make it through the squeeze and he arrived at the 10-foot pit. Seeing Floyd trapped, he tried to ignore the pebbles that were tumbling behind him.
Please, come down.
I can't right now, Floyd, but I will when I get back.
Behind Casey, his partner is begging to leave. Below Casey, Collins is pleading for help.
Please, I'm so thirsty.
Okay.
Casey
Go ahead,
slid
give my man some
headfirst
water.
into the pit
You know what I'm saying?
and hastily ladled Floyd some coffee. But Floyd
Coffee?
rejected it. Rumbling intensified from above, and in that moment, Casey realized that this was not a plea for sustenance. Floyd knew that a cave-in was inevitable. Scared and approaching his 5th day trapped, he was completely at his wit's end. He knew he was about to be trapped in that cave,
Forever.
and he didn't want to be trapped alone.
For God's sake, Casey.
That's the L man's though. He said, look, I know I'm about to die down here, but you coming with me, all right? Deal? Come on, come on.
Come on, you'll get us killed.
Stay with me, please. Don't leave.
Casey looked into Colin's eyes,
L-mans, bruh.
set the coffee down, and pulled himself out of the pit. He wiggled underneath the sagging ceiling and crawled towards the turnaround room as fast as his limbs could scramble against the
get through?
cave
He got
walls.
through?
He looked back to see the passage closing like a maw. Reflections from the bulb shining around Floyd's neck were no longer visible. Instead, just sobs could be heard, muffled from behind the rocks.
Son, this is crazy.
Miller and Burden awoke in the late morning, confident that today would be the day that they saved Floyd. They had some new equipment too. Some wire to wrap around the wooden blocks to prevent them from slipping. And they changed their mind about that acetylene torch. They'll use it to burn away 2 rocks that had previously blocked their way. But when Miller got to the turnaround room, all of that optimism left him.
He's seen it.
The entrance to the squeeze was now just a pile of debris. Miller froze, staring at it for a long while.
I know he's
Then
sick.
he sighed and did the only thing he could think: attempt to move some of the stones.
Yo,
But
this
each
really...
adjustment led to more rocks just tumbling down and landing in that space.
He really the hero
He
of the story.
persisted until... crash. A large chunk of clay landed onto his feet.
Ooh.
Recognizing the danger, Miller returned to the surface. 15 minutes later, he emerged from the cave with a bloodied-up nose and bruises down his back and shoulders. Burden caught sight and races over to him. Miller just says, "For God's sake, just don't let Homer or anyone else back in there." Now, he didn't actually need to worry about Homer going back in there because he was sidelined with illness. But he did, however, need to worry about Gerald because he was furious. Gerald had warned everyone that putting dozens of people in Sand Cave would cause a collapse. It certainly did. The rest of that day would be wasted as men threw blame around and screamed at each other about how
See, I know this face. Chat. Whose face is this, bruh? I know this face.
to handle the cave-in.
That's from a movie.
And Floyd spent the rest of that day alone.
Dang, my man is... Woo! Chat, y'all think
The
y'all would still
surveyors
be
continued
sane
checking the cave throughout the day.
128
By the
hours
evening,
in?
Carmichael had ordered everyone to an assembly. Gerald took the floor. He was going to try one last daring rescue. He boldly announced his plan and an ultimatum.
Listen up. There's death down there. The walls and ceilings are crumbling. Unless you're determined to take the biggest chance you ever took in your life,
Please go
tell
home.
me now and stay outside.
Next, they told all the Gawkers to get the fuck out of the cave, clear off. And over the next 8 hours, Gerald would enter and leave Sand Cave at least 5 times, chipping away at that pile of debris. In the woods, men sawed trees and chopped logs to shore up the cave walls.
Okay.
Underground, the crew reinforced cracks and wobbling boulders with fresh strips of wood. Gerald assessed that about 4 barrels of rocks would need to be moved, and piece by piece, they made that happen. Steadily, they managed to move enough rock to allow Gerald to get within earshot of Floyd.
Hello? I need food.
I get PTSD playing
Bad
Minecraft,
news.
bro.
We
Facts.
can't reach you, but hold on. We're coming.
Stone by stone, they continued. After a few hours, the light of the bulb around Floyd's neck was peeking
Shine through.
A couple more hours, enough room for Gerald to squeeze through.
Okay, that's enough. Floyd, I'm going for now. But when I get back, I'm gonna get you out of there.
Exhausted but still determined,
Bruh,
Gerald
he gotta
crawled
walk
back
out
up
there
the cave and marched
and say, do not let nobody in this cave. All right?
to the men huddling outside.
Gather the equipment, and in an hour's time, it's gonna be me and Floyd coming out of that cave.
Determination. All right, that's 4 hours.
Gerald entered Sand Cave for his final time. The walls had been reinforced, but mud and water was accumulating everywhere. He waded through it and pressed on past the danger of the sagging ceiling. With determination on his face and a grease gun clutched in his right hand, he scrambled towards Floyd. But before the final squeeze, he stopped. It was all gone. The cave ceiling had crumbled once again. Gerald stared motionlessly at the pile. Then he began to yell.
Floyd!
A rock disconnected from the ceiling and tumbled onto Gerald's head. Luckily, just a small one. He rubbed his scalp and called out again.
Floyd!
This time, a moan. It rumbled from the other side. Fearing that his friend was slipping out of consciousness, Gerald willed himself against the cave, launching the debris behind him with force. He ignored the pain from being struck on the head and clawed at the stone pile. He carried on this way for several minutes, until a sharp, heavy rock dropped from the ceiling and landed squarely on his back. No more than 15 minutes later, Gerald returned to the surface, defeated.
Brother, you're done.
Only after the cave-ins did they start to think about all of the things that they could have done.
Wait, why didn't we rig a portable telephone line? That would have been incredibly simple here in 1925.
Yeah, why have we been running in and out to deliver updates?
Why didn't we give him an AM radio? He could have had something to listen to and receive messages of support from the public.
Shut up.
Wait, why don't we rig up a tarpaulin so we could lift his torso up so he wouldn't be slowly dying of exposure?
Oh god, why didn't we run a feeding tube? That's also a technology we have in 1925.
All too late. Now what? The one route to get to Floyd is closed forever.
No.
That meant two options.
You could drill.
Number one, capitulation. Surrender him to the cave. Or number two, dig down from directly above Floyd.
See, that's what I was going to think.
Now, the prospect of digging from above seemed almost fanciful. At least, it did in the beginning. But luckily, they had some help. Owing to Miller's reporting, Floyd had become practically the most famous person in the country.
What?
The rescue had become a high priority for the governor of Kentucky. Lieutenant General Denhart enters the scene.
Hey, chat, listen, this is what we about to do. We about to fake a cave trapping, all right? Okay? We're going to go to a cave, and I'm going to get trapped, all right? And, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna phase rugged, pretty boy Fredo it, you know what I'm saying? And hopefully, you know what I'm saying? Come on now.
He's been updated on the situation, and following shortly behind him is a small army of miners and engineers. He declared to the despondent crowd, "Gentlemen, I am here on behalf of the governor. The purse strings of Kentucky are open. Take this blank check and bring that man out."
So you telling me it's people now? My man was stuck during Great Depression times. All right. You telling me it's people starving, losing their homes, you know? But y'all want to save one person in a cave? Come on, bro. What are we doing?
Alive.
A blank check?
Floyd, in that cold, wet confine, could not have imagined the scale of the operation that was going on 55 feet above him.
Imagine if they started with this, though.
Authorities assumed control of Colin's rescue.
Yeah, they said this was between 1921, right, and 1939. That was the span. Hold up. But when exactly did they say?
Denhart gave Henry Carmichael,
because they say he was the top 3 non-political stories within that time span,
the lead to dig, and Carmichael raced to get to work. He enlisted his employees, his fleet of expensive high-tech machinery. Professional groups were brought in from all across the state. Local townspeople were mostly excluded, and for the first time since Collins had been trapped, work was now about to go ahead in a systematic manner. Everyone knew the plan. Everyone had something to do, and everyone was working
1925
fast. But just as hopes were rising, they were once again dashed against the rocks. They had all of this state-of-the-art machinery shipped in and assembled by the engineers and rearing to go, and it was all worthless. See, the problem is, the cave drew air into it. These diesel-powered engines pumped out enormous volumes of choking exhaust. Within a day's operation, the cave would be filled with carbon monoxide, and Floyd would be dead from asphyxiation. Just as quickly as solutions would arise, the cave would parry them away. It refused to let this man go. So engineers and miners had wasted hours assembling everything, only to realize that they had to pack it all up and cart it away. Because the digging of a 55-foot shaft would be done with picks and shovels.
Better get to work, boy. They better call Zero from Holes. Come on now.
Carmichael didn't know much about caves, but he knew a lot about quarrying, and he estimated that his team of 75 volunteers could dig and dredge at a rate of 2 feet per hour. If they worked around the clock, they would be digging directly into the spot where Floyd lays within 30 hours.
Jesus.
Now, is it possible that Floyd could survive for another 30 hours? Absolutely. Let's go. The first ton was moved, and at first, it was easy work. Just dirt and clay. Carmichael understood well that this was a race against time, so he watched the men closely, and if they seemed to be slowing down, even a little, they would be yanked out, and immediately a new worker subbed in. Nonetheless, the pace slowed. By 10 feet, the shaft narrowed greatly, which meant that only 2 men could work at a time. At 15 feet, they hit boulders. Pickaxes went in, and a system of pulleys and buckets had to be used to cart the rock out. Tracks were even laid to ferry the refuse to a dump site. Time passed. Hours passed. Night went to day. The day was hot. This was yet another problem, because it's early February, there's tons of ice still in the ground, and its exposure to the fresh midday sun meant that the walls of the shaft were softening and the ground becoming sodden. The pace of digging slowed. It was now only half a foot per hour. Most anyone could do was watch helplessly on the sidelines and pray. Interestingly, though, there were a lot of people on the sidelines. Floyd wouldn't have believed that the space above him had turned into a literal...
This is sick. This is sick. A man is in the cave dying, and y'all playing carnival games, bruh. Y'all making funnel cake and deep fried glizzies.
Carnival in his honor. Vendors showed up to sell hamburgers, hot dogs, and souvenirs. Families sprawled out over blankets to listen to hymns from local church groups. The local mountebanks sold moonshine and miracle cures. There was even a bloody juggler. And Old Man Lee was there, walking around, shaking his jar, and soliciting donations. But where were Homer and Burden and Miller during all of this?
Oh yeah, he would have got out of there quick these days.
Let's back up a bit. People did not properly understand exactly how Floyd was trapped, and the news didn't help much either. So the obvious question started to arise. Why hasn't he been rescued yet? Just clear some gravel or pull a rope. How is this so hard?
People about to start making conspiracy theories.
I heard they didn't even want to have him rescued at all.
I heard that they're doing all of this for publicity.
And Lee's activity of soliciting donations, remember from before, further inflamed rumors.
I bet Floyd isn't even trapped in there.
These were all real rumors, and they got worse.
You know what? I've heard he comes out at night, and then he just goes back in the morning.
Other rumors included...
I heard that after Floyd went into the cave, someone murdered him.
Others said...
I think they're withholding food and water from him so he dies.
This whole thing is a fraud.
As time went on...
Bro, imagine what the internet would have done back in this day, bro.
It was harder and harder to ignore the hoax claims. Then, people started to form righteous mobs, claiming the whole thing was a fraud, and they started to get nasty. In fact...
If it was fake, alright, why would you come and cause a ruckus? Just go live your regular life. You ain't got to do nothing.
2 people even went to the telegraph office and pretended to be Floyd sending telegrams to his mother. Here's what it said. Quote, Please contradict statements that I am buried alive in Sand Cave. Stop. Tell mother I am all right. Stop. Am coming home. Stop. Floyd Collins.
Stop.
Naturally, the AP published these telegrams unquestioningly, and now word is out to the press that he isn't actually in the cave after all. That made the authorities look foolish.
That's crazy.
And it could not go on. So, a hasty court-martial was arranged, and Homer, Miller, and Gerald were summoned. They hold one session on Monday and another on Tuesday. Lee and everyone else is cleared of charges, a retraction is written, and things carry on.
LMAO.
Generators rumbled. Pumps churned out water. Men continued working in shifts and carrying away the earth. Here they are.
Yo,
with
my man
strips of
ain't had
lumber
no
to shore
food
up
and
the
water in
walls.
like a day and a half, bro.
They were only 25 feet down. The pace had slowed to 4 inches per hour. In their desperation, they resorted to dynamite. But this did little to the boulders. Despite all these bleak circumstances, people's spirits were high because everyone was keen for their turn to dig. And because they had one more thing to latch onto. He is probably still alive. Now, how do they know that? Okay, so remember that light bulb around Floyd's neck? Well, it's powered by a simple copper wire. Bare copper wire is subject to very minute fluctuations in resistance. So, an engineer rigs up a radio amplifier to this wire to read the current and see
You got
those
the
small
durability of
fluctuations.
anime character facts, bro.
There they were. About 20 per minute. The rate of steady breathing. As his chest expands and contracts, they can read it from this device.
That's crazy,
And
bruh.
so,
Look
they
at
kept going.
science.
And going. And going. 30 hours was the original estimate. Now 144 hours had come and gone, and they were only at 44 feet. Then, rain fell.
That's tough.
Rain that mixed with dirt to make mud, much of which then froze to make ice. Ice which expanded and damaged the integrity of the shaft walls.
Oh my god.
Slowing down with every hour, they continued. Many more hours passed,
My
and
man
they
has
were
been
getting
there
close.
for like
But it was
14
now
14
15
days,
days since Floyd was
15.
first stuck in that cave, and people had mostly lost hope. That excitement in the newspapers was tempering down. Visitors began clearing out from Cave City. Many still held on to hope, but their final lifeline, that light bulb, had burnt out. And it wasn't possible to do any more readings on the radio amplifier without it. No one knew if Floyd was still alive.
Bro, y'all like 6 feet away. Keep going.
Another 51 hours would pass before, finally, they reached the 60-foot depth.
I'm in. Chisel.
A chisel is handed down. At 1:30 p.m. on Monday, February 16th, Sand Cave would open once again. For 17 days, Floyd had been trapped underground, stuck in the same position. 4 days without heat or light. 12 without food or water.
Crazy.
But maybe the dripping of the cave water had provided him with some sustenance? There are stories
He gotta
of
be
people
like, there's no way we told this whole story and my man dead, bro. There's no way.
surviving harsher extremes. Rescuers frantically.
If internet historian, let me tell you something. If you told this whole story and Floyd's dead, I'm reporting your channel, bro. I'm reporting. I'm just kidding, bro. I appreciate you. You know what I'm saying? Thank W reaction. W. You know what I'm saying?
He tugged at rocks to widen the hole. Everybody stood by, absolutely silent, peering into that hole. Ed flashed his light into the gap, then eased himself in. Brenner aimed his light around the room, and then, finally, at Floyd. The first thing he saw was a golden shimmer. It was not the light bulb. It was the reflection of Floyd's tooth. His mouth hung open. He was dead. Brenner was helped out of the cave and he delivered the news.
Dead.
A coroner would later state that Floyd succumbed to exposure and that they had missed him by just 3 days, about the same time that the light bulb had gone out.
That's crazy. Bruh.
But what would they do now with the body? The shaft walls were ready to fall inwards, and risking lives to remove a corpse was seen as just irresponsible.
Exactly.
So the following morning, officials made a decision. Floyd would be entombed where he lay.
That's crazy.
The cave would keep its victim. Now, this did not sit well with the family, but what could they do? The next day, they planned the funeral. The town emptied of people, and the shaft with Floyd at the bottom was refilled with soil.
I'm sick, bro.
But that's not quite the end of the story. But if you hung on for this long, keep holding on, because things are going to continue to get interesting. But first, let me do a wrap-up of where everyone is and all that stuff. Context. The Collins family already had financial hardship. Locals saw Old Man Lee scouring the rescue site for glass bottles. But the owner of the land, B. Doyle, and supposed friend of Floyd, was wholly unsympathetic. He erected a sign on the highway which said, 200 yards away, the body of Floyd Collins is imprisoned in Sand Cave. Then he began charging tourists 50 cents apiece for the opportunity to gander into the hole. It's 100 years later, B's dead. Let's call it even. Also, remember those claims of Kentucky being an open purse? Well, the state reneged on the deal. They refused to pay many of the rescuers.
L-mans, bruh. They're L-mans. They made a lot of money. They had a lot of tourism. Now they just gonna renege like that?
And most of them went home without any compensation. Some of them did make some money out of the situation, though. They lucked into vaudeville gigs and roamed the country, giving their first-person account. Miller, however, received an astonishing offer, a $50,000 contract from
$810,000 in today's money.
From the Chautauqua lecture circuit, equivalent to the better part of $1 million in today's money. He declined. He continued to work at the Louisville Courier
He's tripping. That man's bugging. He's bugging.
Journal. The following year, his coverage of Floyd's story
I'm
earned him the
both of them.
Pulitzer Prize.
Facts, man.
Now the brother, Homer, he needed money and he agreed to do that vaudeville circuit. He stood on stage and regaled the audience about tales of his brother, their childhood, and the tragedy. But Homer made it known why he was up here on stage trying to get money. He had a mission.
I kept thinking of Floyd lying in the muck, where he had suffered beyond our power to imagine. I would never have peace of mind if he remained there.
He wanted the money to dig Floyd up and get him out of that cave.
That's crazy.
A couple of months later, he had it. Alright, so back to Floyd. April 17th, 1925. 7 miners showed up to the scene. They began to dig. Within a week, they had arrived at Floyd. And this time, they approached from the other side of the rock formation. That way, they could remove the rock pinning Floyd's leg. They lifted him up from his tomb and laid him down on the fresh air above. April 26th, 1925.
Chino was
Floyd
good.
was set to rest in the family cemetery. A stalagmite had been set as a headstone to
That's
mark out
crazy.
his plot. And there he lay. No, that's not actually where it ends. Okay, this is where it gets weird. 2 years later.
This, out of this whole story you just told us, this is where it gets weird? Bruh, ain't no way, bruh.
1927. Times have been tough for the Collins. So Floyd's dad sold Sand Cave to a dentist named Dr. Harry B. Thomas for $10,000. Now, Homer begged him not to, because at the time, the government was starting to buy up tons of land in the area and turn it into national parks. They had to pay at a very competitive rate. But Lee was becoming a bit old and senile by this point, and frankly, it's doubtful that he cared about Homer or Floyd or anyone else for that matter.
He was trying to just die drinking his nice bootleg booze, bruh.
It's 100 years later, he's dead now. Let's call it even. So, the point is, in this land sale with Thomas, Lee agreed to a very odd clause. And that clause said, everything on that property belongs to Thomas. And should he wish, for example, to exhume a dead body and re-embalm it and put it on display in something really...
This man is sick, bruh. He's sick.
tacky, like a glass coffin inside a cave, maybe, then that would be his prerogative. Lee signed yes. And Thomas did exactly that. Doyle made Floyd's corpse a tourist attraction. That's right. Two bits of gander come and wonder at the incredible dead man who died in a cave.
It still stands today? Nah. Let me look up the sand cave, bruh. There's
to
no
add
way.
Insult to injury. It worked. Visitors returned to Sand Cave to gawk morbidly at Floyd. Within a few months, Thomas had turned Lee's failing farm into a successful business. Now, the rest of Colin's family is horrified. They try a number of times to get Floyd returned to them, including through the legal system. But somehow, incredibly, the judge ruled in Thomas's favor. And so, there he lay for the next 2 years.
Oh, okay. Not that long. That's kind of weird.
The cave was not done with Floyd. Until someone hatched a plan. 2 years later.
They're gonna blow it up. They got to.
It's midnight, outside Sand Cave. Footsteps can be heard rustling through the brush. Now, we don't know who these two men are, but we know why they are here. To rob a grave. They sneak inside and clamber over the rocks in the darkness. Reaching Floyd's casket, they undo the latch and throw open the lid. There is his shriveled body. They throw him in a gunny sack and they race off into the night. For 800 yards they carry dear Floyd like a couple of sweaty Santas about to deliver a really terrible Christmas present. Panting, out of breath, knowing that they're going to get caught any minute, they reach the Kentucky Green River hillside. There's no time. With a 1, 2, 3, they launch his body towards the river, and Floyd goes sailing into the air, up, into the starlit beyond, and landing in a bush. Oh, God. The two men flee from the scene. Now, the next morning, Thomas notices that the body of Floyd is somewhat missing, and he contacts the authorities.
He's gonna put a
The
fake
police
one in
come,
there?
they dust the casket for fingerprints, and bloodhounds are given Floyd's scent and let loose into the hillside. A few hours later, they manage to find him, a tangled up mess near the river, but this time with a leg missing. That same one that was trapped under the rock.
Crazy.
So, despite his protest, it had been amputated. Neither the leg nor the culprits were ever found. And while it would be nice to think that this was some well-intentioned duo that did this out of the kindness of their hearts to free Floyd, it's much more likely that it was an act of vandalism because Floyd was simply too much of a hot tourist attraction. The following day, Floyd was cast back into the cave, back into his box, and it was covered by a metal lid, surrounded by a metal chain.
That's crazy.
And locked with a padlock. He was now more trapped than he had ever been.
You can't even tell if he's
This
in there.
cave had spun fate once again to make sure that its victim would never leave. And so, time passed. Floyd's body would continue to decay. The rot from his body would eventually rot the casket too, and every decade or so, it would need to be replaced.
4 caskets?
A few years later, he was no longer on display. But even then, he remained
Hold up. Caskets deteriorate? Nah, listen, we're gonna have to fix that, bro, before zombies start coming out the ground. Let's go ahead, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna need some more modern technology.
In that box for many more years. In 1961, Floyd's Cave was purchased by Mammoth Cave National Park.
That's the one I went to, you know what I'm saying? Mammoth Cave.
And it was closed to the public. There would be no more visitors. The entrance itself to Floyd's Cave was closed with a steel gate and bolted, then welded shut. But the Collins family never gave up objecting to Colin's body being left in the cave. And here is where the story ends. In 1989, at the Collins' request, the National Park Service ventured into Floyd's Cave. Continuing on a more than 60-year tradition, a team of people worked over the course of several days to remove him from the cave. They took him out, left the cave, locked it behind them, and laid Floyd to rest at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery. After 64 years in Sand Cave, he is now finally at peace.
That's crazy.
The end. Thank you to Wendigoon as Floyd.
If you don't let me out, I'm going to hire a gang of hitmen to come to your house and kill your family.
Samito as Homer.
The BTS meal McDonald's bag that has
I'm
McDonald's
hungry.
and BTS.
Yo, internet historian, put me in the video, bro. Please. Here's my face. Come on, brother.
Shut the fuck up and eat some BTS, bro.
Ordinary Things as Miller.
I'm enthusiastic, but would ultimately duck out the back exit.
Rusty Cage as Gerald.
Oh, well, hello there. Haven't seen y'all in a while.
This is so fire, bro. Internet historian. My bad.
Welcome to my new home.
And many kudos as Burden.
Hey, buddy. You right down there?
I can.
A little sleepy?
I can get out.
We get your coffee?
Cold and
Little cup of Joe? Little cup of Joseph?
I'm starting.
Little cup of Joseph? Sleepy guy?
Also, by the way, in case you're confused about the channels, this is how it works now.
Unscripted content. Hold on. What was the third?
Also, by the way, in case you're...
Different content. Bro, we're gonna have to check out them. People have been telling me to check out incognito mode, so we're gonna have to check that out. You know what I'm saying? But look, y'all like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Internet historian with a bang. This might be the greatest video on YouTube I ever seen, bro. I ain't gonna lie. Top 5 for sure.